Hello, thank you for signing in this afternoon. My name is Mike Kramer. I am the Calibration Program Manager at Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation, and I'd like to welcome you all to our first live webinar of 2018. And as always, this webinar is being recorded. You can go to our website at pjlabs.com, go to the link for recorded webinars, and you can go back, listen to this one. You can have a colleague that may have missed out that want to go back and watch and listen. That can be accomplished through our website, along with the past recordings of all the webinars we've done since 2012 are available up there on our website. So going back to the first slide there, as you can see, the topic for today is is section 7.9, complaints, and this is in regards to and I can officially say this, ISO IEC 17025 2017 without adding that word draft to the 2017 version. So it's a official document, standard, and I brought this forth, and actually I take that back. It was published prior to our December webinar. So what I have here for the benefit of you folks that were not available during December, and or perhaps for you all that were, as a refresher as far as where we're at with 17025 2017, and what are we looking for as far as coming into compliance. So I thought I'd just go over this prior to diving into today's presentation. Okay, as stated, ISO 17025 2017 became an official document standard on November 29th, 2017. So all throughout the year, I've been saying during my assessments and questions asked that I felt very strongly that it was going to be completed by the end of 2017, and in fact, yes, it was. So ILAC, International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, which PJLA is a ILAC signatory, came out with a transition period for labs to comply with the standards. So hence, shortly after this was done, PJLA sent out that notification number 41. So in a nutshell, if you are still, and I'm assuming there's probably not many labs that are accredited to the 17 version, PJLA will start actually assessing to that this coming February, which is approximately a week away. So all laboratories must be accredited to the new standard by November 29th, 2020, and has stated that we will start assessing laboratories to the new standard as early as February, this coming February. So during this coming year, during your assessments or when you're notified of your scheduling of your accreditation, you will be asked if you want to basically transition over to the 2017 standard during that upcoming assessment. However, all laboratories must transition no later than August 31st, 2020. So we built in a little buffer there just in case laboratory had to some closure concerns, and the actual assessment package did not get closed prior to November 29th. So right now it's a 3-year transition. You can stay accredited to 2005 up to that 3-year period. However, if you like to get accredited to the new standard, by all means, prepare yourself, become versed in the standard, and let PJLA know prior to your next assessment. The standard is available for purchase. You can get it directly through iso.org at that web address specified at the bottom there. Okay, so just a little bit of repeat from the previous webinar. I am going to step back in time here for this particular assessment, and I'm going to look at what the requirement was for complaints from the 2005 version. And it's not going to take a whole lot of slides. As you can see, the entire requirement from 2005 is depicted on this particular slide. So there's some significant changes to this requirement. There's much more importance placed by 17025 on this particular section. So from 2005, which was section 4.8, the requirement was the laboratory shall have a policy and procedure for the resolution of complaints received by the customers or other parties. Records shall be maintained for all complaints and of the investigations and corrective action taken by the laboratory. So basically, in order to comply with this section, you have to have a policy and procedure. You have to maintain records, and then if needed, we saw this quite often, that if the complaint is justified, that is typically crosswalked over to the corrective action procedure, and appropriate action was taken by the laboratory. So first thing I want to highlight is actually in the 2017 standard, complaint is one of 9 new definitions added to the standard. Complaint is, as defined by 17025, 2017, the expression of dissatisfaction by any person or organizations to a laboratory relating to the activity or results of that laboratory where a response is expected. Notice there it has laboratory, section 3.6. That's another new definition. A laboratory is defined as any organization performing testing, calibration, or sampling that's going to be used for further testing or calibration. So that's 3.6 is the definition of a laboratory. That's basically what it is. So 7.9, right off the bat, if you recall 2005, you have to have a policy and procedure. What does 2017 state? 791 states the laboratory shall have a documented process to receive, evaluate, and make decisions on complaints. So one thing with the new standard, and the few times I've presented on the draft, one thing that's really emphasized is the whole concept of electronics, data control, computers. They're much more prevalent today, utilized in more specific manners than they were back in 2005. So hence, when you're looking at a procedure, you're looking at basically a documented type procedure. A process can be basically something that outlines the steps necessary to complete a task or a process. So a way to document a process may include things such as flowcharts, swim lane diagrams, standard operating procedures, or manually in Excel or through automated software. So you might have a system set up where your computer is actually walking you through the steps of a particular process. So one thing I want to emphasize, and we're talking about complaints here, but this is can be crosswalked over to a lot of the requirements within the new standard. You're currently accredited to 17025, and you have a documented procedure that you wrote to comply with the 2005 version. You can still use that procedure. A A lot of times during the standard, you have to be able to communicate things to the laboratory, to the staff. It does not. It's less prescriptive than previously, where you don't actually have to do it during with the documented procedures. However, that can still be used as a way to communicate, as a vehicle to communicate. So in this particular instance, if you currently have a documented procedure, you want to keep it, that's fine. However, for this particular section 7.9, it may need to be revised in order to meet these additional requirements that we're going to be looking at here. Okay, so we have a process in place. 792, a description of the handling process for complaints shall be made available to any interested party on request. Upon receipt of a complaint, the laboratory shall confirm whether the complainants relate to laboratory activities that is responsible for, and if so, and I like this part, shall deal with it. The laboratory shall be responsible for all decisions at all levels of the handling process for complaints. So basically, let's dissect that a little bit more. So this is stating that anyone who is interested, it's not stating a specific complaint, it's stating your process. So an interested party is interested in, hey, what do you do if a customer calls in a complaint? The standard is saying you are required to provide them that process. When a complaint is received, the laboratory is responsible and shall deal with it. So pretty self-explanatory there. And the laboratory shall be responsible for all decisions levels for handling the complaints. Okay, 793, the process for handling complaints, and we have a shall there. That is a requirement. Include at least the following elements. So if you have a procedure, or if you're going to have some sort of other process, you need to include the following. A description of the process for receiving, validating, investigating the complaint, and deciding what actions are to be taken in response to it. B, tracking and recording complaints, including actions taken to resolve them. Excuse me. C, ensuring that any appropriate action is taken. So I look and see it's sort of you have a complaint, you take corrective action, that going back and perhaps evaluating it and monitoring it and assuring that it is effective. The laboratory receiving the complaint shall be responsible for gathering and verifying all necessary information to evaluate the complaint. So this particular requirement, along with 792, puts the onus on the laboratory. There could be some cases, perhaps you're not a standalone laboratory. You could be a testing laboratory or a calibration laboratory within a manufacturing facility. These are more aimed at it's the laboratory is responsible for handling these complaints. So when they come in, it's the laboratory's responsibility. If you're, of course, a standalone testing or calibration organization, when these things occur, of course, it's going to be directly to the testing or calibration laboratory. So 792, in other words, the laboratory needs to assure information received is accurate. So if you get what you consider a complaint in, let's say it's a customer complaint, and I always say this, life in general, there's two sides to every story. So, of course, you want to verify and validate all the information that the complaint is conveying to you as a laboratory. It may be a valid complaint. It may not be a valid complaint. For example, if a complainant calls 3 months after you did a test or calibration work for them, and they're being audited, and the auditor is specifying to them that, hey, your calibration or test is not what you need it to be. You need to look, for example, this property or this specific tolerance. You go back, you investigate it, you look at the contract review process where it was specified to the customer at that time what was needed. Hence, it may not be a valid complaint. Okay, moving right along here, as you can see, we have a lot more clauses in this section than we did in 2005. So, 795, whenever possible, the laboratory shall acknowledge receipts of the complaint and provide the complainant with progress reports in the outcome. So basically, you need to keep them in the loop. So, complainant calls, it could be taken by perhaps an administrative person that may not be the one that's going to be involved in the process, but may convey the original complaint, let's say, for example, to the laboratory manager to investigate. Hence, the laboratory should acknowledge that to the complainant that it has received the complaint, give them a process report if it's may take some time to resolve this, and then last but not least, the outcome. Which brings us to outcome, which brings us to a interesting clause here, 796. And I'm going to read this slowly because I've read through it a couple times myself, and there's a couple ways this can be interpreted. The outcome is to be communicated to the complainant shall be made, comma, or, hence we have a choice there, or reviewed and approved by individuals not involved in the original laboratory's activities in question. So what that is saying, if let's say there was a particular technician that a complaint was issued against, for whatever reason, that particular individual shall not communicate the outcome to the complaint or review and approve the corrective action or correction taken by the lab in order to resolve it. So if you're a larger organization, you have a large staff, that might be kind of a simple thing to do to remove that person, individual, totally from this particular complaint. If you're a small organization, and we do have some one person, 2 person organizations that's fall under our accreditation, it can be more challenging. Hence, you see a note there. This can be performed by external personnel. So what that is saying is you'll have to take it outside the boundaries of the laboratory. And it just says external personnel. Who can that be? It's not really specific. However, if I was assessing this and it happened to occur, I would look at the competence of that individual. There is a whole other requirements under personnel that's related to laboratories and laboratory activities in regards to competence. So if it's a technical issue, I would, of course, expect this to be evaluated if the external source by somebody who is knowledgeable of the particular instance. So that is definitely a new requirement there. 797. Whenever possible, the laboratory shall give formal notice the end of the complaint handling to the complainants. So pretty straightforward there, along with the outcome. So when you're finished with the complaint, taking any appropriate corrective action if needed, the complainant should be notified. Okay. So I believe we've gone through the all the requirements. We didn't mention anything about confidentiality. So sort of the 2017 standard, it's a lot less repetition in, stated in there than what was stated in the 2005 version. So actually confidentiality, and stay tuned next month, as you'll see, that next webinar is going to touch on this, is actually covered in 423. Hence, somebody calls in, they have a complaint about the individual, they want to remain anonymous. Under 423, information about the customer obtained from sources other than the customer shall be confidential between the customer and the laboratory. The provider or source of this information shall be confidential to the laboratory and shall not be shared with the customer unless agreed to by the source. So hence, if that individual is not concerned with their name being associated with the complaint and want to let the organization know that, then that has to be agreed to by the source of the complaint. Okay, that is actually the end of the presentation. So you can see we have what is it, seven clauses there as opposed to the one in 2005. So as always, we have an opportunity for you all to ask any questions pertaining to the material we just went over. So you should have a place on your screen to submit questions. They will be filtered to me. So at this time, we'll provide a 5-minute time frame for any questions to come into our office, be funneled to myself, and I will chime in here after approximately 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Have quite a few questions here. I put this slide back up here just for reference purposes, going through some of these questions. First question, if a complaint received is ultimately determined to not be a valid complaint, does it need to be documented as a complaint? Well, if you see right here, the requirement 793, the process of a complaint shall include at least the following elements and methods. A description of the process for receiving, validating. So I'm assuming during that process there, if you're determining whether or not it still needs to be documented as a complaint, that would be determined during that phase there. If you go to B, tracking and recording complaints, including any actions taken to resolve them. So in this particular case, if it comes in as a complaint, if it's not a valid complaint, I would say yes, it needs to be documented. However, the whatever reasoning that was brought forth to determine that, hey, this is not a valid complaint, I'm putting the preface there, should be documented. When we receive a customer, when received from a customer, when should it be considered a nonconformance, and when is it a complaint? Well, just like anything, a nonconformance, if you have a complaint that comes in, and let's say basically a nonconformance is when you're not complying with the requirements of 17025, the requirements stated in your own quality management system, and then it's a nonconformance. So let's say a customer called and comes to mind looking at a report and say, hey, you didn't take uncertainty into account and making a statement of compliance. Well, that's a requirement. You have to do that. That would be, and your investigation clearly indicated that the lab committed a nonconformance against a requirement. Then it would be a nonconformance. So if the source just happens to come from a complainant, and you're not complying with your own requirements or requirements set by your accrediting body, PL 123, SOP3, and PJLA's instances, or your own quality management system, it's a nonconformance. That hasn't changed at all. If a complaint is, let's say, for example, a customer calls and complains, hey, I called your office at 6 o'clock and nobody answered the phone, and your office closes at 5. Well, you're not really, it's probably not going to be a nonconformance. Again, well, for any requirements within the standards that says you have to be open till 6, or if you're stating in your QMS, or if you're advertising that you are and you weren't, then it could in fact be a nonconformance. But something like that where there is no set requirement in place, then that of course would not be recorded as a nonconformance. This sounds like it would require a car for every occurrence. Well, I just gave you an example of an example where it would not. If you're if the complaint does not constitute that a requirement was not being met, then a car would not be needed. I'm a little confused on the confidentiality clause in the last screen. Can you provide an example? Oh, let's say, hey, my name just come to mind. Hey, we have a no smoking policy on our premises, and I had some of your technicians in here performing calibration on our truck scale outside, and I saw one of them sneak behind the truck and start taking a smoke. I don't want my name known, but this is we would like this investigated. So that's just sort of you're asking me to provide an example. So that's when someone who's issuing a complaint does not want their names known. Person could say, hey, my name's Jack Jones, and I don't care if you let this particular person knows, but I'm complaining about the fact that they were taking a smoke on our premises where we clearly indicated no smoking. If this year our audit is a surveillance, we need to wait until 2019 reaccreditation audit. So I assume what you're saying is you want to transition to the 2017. So I would say, first of all, make sure you have a copy of the standard, you do your internal audit, and you are assured that you are going to comply with the standard. Now, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, folks listening at headquarters, if it's a surveillance year and you want to transition, I believe just a little bit more time, I'm saying a little bit, some more time would be added to that assessment to verify the requirements of 2017 are met. So that's something you may want to call the office directly just to verify. But I believe if it's an off-site surveillance year and you want to transition, that additional time would be allocated for that. Okay, excuse me, I'm reading these off my phone, so let me get to the next screen. To be transitioning this year, what are the minimal requirements that have to be fulfilled? Well, that's simple. You have to comply with 17025 2017. So I would, if you're looking for what needs to be fulfilled, I would assure that you have a copy of that standard, that you do your internal audit against that standard, not to 2005. Like I said, there's many things in 2005 that were required that aren't required in the 2017 version. However, you could still utilize a lot of the procedures, documented procedures that you have in place could still be used to comply with the requirements. That's going to take me, actually, lead me into the next question here. I see you will have a transition workshop. We'll have that workshop in Spanish. Could be established in Mexico. Yes, I believe PJLA is working on that. Actually, I've been told to provide my slides. I am going to be the one conducting the transition workshop to personnel at PJLA that can actually translate those slides for me. So can't give you anything definite on that, but I believe it's in the works. So just correlating to the previous questions, what requirements need to be fulfilled, and you'll see here on a slide here in a little bit, and I'll bring it up right now actually. Right there, you can see we do have resources available. So, and they're coming up here very shortly, first week in February. The transition workshop will be for those of you all who are transitioning. And the emphasis on that, and you can see it's going to be a one-day workshop. And go to our website for additional details. But it's mainly tailored for those folks that are transitioning to the 2017 and basically looking at what are the significant changes. What are you going to need to change when you're just basically transition? The 2007, the other workshop is a 2-day, and that is going to be handled like all of our internal auditor workshops. However, this will be specifically to 2017, so we will go through all the requirements, and that will be a 2-day workshop, and more tailored to those folks that may not have been operating under the 2005 system and not totally familiar with those requirements. So I hope I was clear on that. Also, while I'm reading these questions, getting ahead of myself. Our next webinar is scheduled for actually next February. And actually, if you go on site, to our website, we actually have the schedule for the next 6 months posted. First half of the year, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, bear with me. I appear to hit the wrong button on my phone here. See if I was at the end of those questions. That question is a repeat. I'm sorry, I'm just got a few emails in here with the different questions. Okay, question. I just want to verify if there is a process in place, we can still use that, correct? It will just need to be revised to make sure we are complying with the new rule. So absolutely. I mean, that's what the standard said. You have to have a process. Your process can be documented and, can be accomplished in many different formats. You could have a formal procedure where you have the process documented. It could be basically a process in your software that runs you through the process. When it mentions to track and document all process taken when complaints are made, will use an NCR program be acceptable? Yes, and I've seen that quite often in the 2005, and I still see it in 2017. If your complaint is a valid complaint and results in a non-conformance, then that should be crossed. It's perfectly acceptable to crosswalk that over to your CAPA procedure from there. So with your CAPA, you're going to identify the non-conformance. You're going to identify the root cause. You're going to see what type of corrective action will be needed to get at the root cause, and you're going to verify it to make sure that corrective action's been effective. So get a little bit off topic there, but yes, it's perfectly acceptable to run that to the corrective action procedure. Once we update to the new version and our service providers have not yet upgraded, I assume we can still use their services as long as they are still within their transition period. Well, 17025 2005, it'll still be recognized up until that 2020 version. So if you have a requirement, say for traceability, for example, that you're going to use accredited sources for your calibrations, that could still be maintained in 2005 and 2017. So they're both recognized standards right now. So I don't see why you could not continue to use those providers unless you specify something yourself within your own quality management system that you would strictly use 2017. There's nothing in the standard or PJLA's policies right now that would not permit you from using those folks that has yet to transition. When talking about confidentiality, does this need to be mentioned within the process of the complaint? I would say it is a requirement that confidentiality is being maintained. And I would say, yes, I was going to put a should there, that you should mention, that should be incorporated into the process. Does a complainant want to remain anonymous? Um, uh, and that it should be mentioned within the process, but the lab, ultimately the laboratory has to ensure that the requirement is being met. So I would specify that if you have a process in place, and in order to fulfill that requirement, to assure that a nonconformance is not going to be made against that requirement, that it should be mentioned within the process. Okay, I believe I have everything. So again, thank you all for joining us this first webinar. And looking ahead, as you can see, next month we're going to be looking at 4.1 and 4.2. These were always they had requirements regarding impartiality and confidentiality within 17025/2005. I can tell you here that they got their own sections now in the 2017 and their expanded requirements. So mark your calendars. February 20th, we'll have that as our topic. And then once again, sure, seating is limited, so we are offering public workshops at the home of PJLA in Troy, Michigan, February 6th, one-day transition workshop. Those of you folks that are transitioning, you're familiar with the requirements of 17025, and you just need this workshop to look at the differences. This is probably the workshop for you all. The other one is a complete 2-day workshop on going over the entire standard, and particularly looking at it from an internal auditor's viewpoint, as far as interviewing, collecting objective evidence, what should be looked at and heard or witnessed during the course of an internal audit, and that would be strictly to the 2017 version. So again, all this information is available on our website under the training tab. So thank you for joining us. Look forward to you all logging in again next month.